What's up, guys? I'm back after 2 weeks of inactivity, or at least racing inactivity. I was kind of sick. You can probably still hear that my voice isn't 100%. But I'm eager to race. I couldn't wait anymore. So I'm going to test my legs on the Innsbrucking course, which is my favorite one. I'm racing for the first time after the racing score officially released. And I'm doing the B category, which is the 520 to 690. I'm at the very bottom, so I expect I will get smoked. But I have no clue how that 2-week pause will affect my racing. I might be completely tired, but I might be rested a lot as well. So what I'm going to do is try to hang on to the group as long as possible and see if I will blow up or if I'll be able to race until the end. I had to increase my weight to 75 kilos to be racing fairly. I gained a kilo, so that's another dark piece of the puzzle. So this course is obviously all about the leg snapper, which is that short little climb. Oh, I don't have my fan turned on.
We are a minute and a half in the race and there is already a big attack at the front. The group didn't look like they would like to react actually. There were only like 2 or 3 riders who reacted. So I really had to put down the power right from the start to bridge the gap. I don't know if this was correct decision. Maybe the group would catch the breakaway anyway. So I already increased the power to stay in the race to about 5 watts per kilo, but it wasn't enough, and here you can see the front really is starting to get away. So I really put the pedal down to bridge the gap right here. And it looked like it might have been worth it after all. A group of 8 riders formed and the rest of the race was about 3 seconds behind. However, unfortunately, the effort weakened and basically the core of the race managed to regroup soon after. So the group is back together, but it looks like the front riders do not want to allow this race to become easy. So there is like still 5 watts per kilo effort at the front of the race.
Sharp start to the race, early breakaway attempt. Are there no power-ups here? We went through the start banner, right?
Here you can see another breakaway attempt from one of the guys at the front, but this time he went alone, so he was only able to ride for several hundred meters, and then he was rejoined by the group again. But it was a sign that this race wouldn't really become a sleep fest or anything.
Yeah, I'm definitely not okay yet. I'm still sweating like crazy.
Yeah, when I returned to riding after my illness, I returned to easy rides for a start, and even during Z1, the sweat was pouring from me, and I definitely felt something like that in this race as well. It wasn't as severe as immediately the day after I returned, but I still wasn't okay during this race, not by a long shot. Here we are approaching the leg snapper number 1, and what you can see here on the cobblestones is a pretty sharp increase in the effort, and that was about the last thing I wanted here, because since I'm not a climber, leg snapper was going to be a test for me anyway. It's not crazy hard climb, it's not long by any shot, but losing ton of energy, especially when I was still not feeling alright, wasn't something that I wanted before such a hard test. So I went pretty sharply into the climb. I started at about 6 watts per kilo. I even went out of the saddle to support my climbing, which is not something I do very often, which is a mistake, by the way. I need to work on that. But you can see the front guys are basically flying off, and it was at this point I realized that this is not going to be a race where I will be fighting for a podium or anything. I guess that's not a big surprise, since this is a race bracket where I was at the bottom, so the top guys here were definitely former A riders. But it was still pretty early in the race, and I guess it was sort of disappointing to see the race basically ending this soon.
I'm not okay. Something's pouring out of my nose.
Obviously, at this point, I knew that I need to go with some other rider to not ride alone, because then I would suffer through the rest of the race. So I was already riding with this guy for quite some time, and soon after another guy flew by. So we tried to match his speed and go with him as well. However, it wasn't easy. Apparently, this guy got connection failure on the leg snapper and tried to recover some of the lost minutes, and his pace was pretty hard for me, even if I stayed in the draft.
My legs are so weak. Unbelievably weak. I do not recommend racing just after illness.
And you can see it on my heart rate as well. I am still riding in the top range of Z2 and a lower range of Z3. But my heart rate is approaching 170 BPM, which for me is my standard pretty hard race range, where usually my heart rate is. So that was another sign that I was getting tired way more by the race that I should be at this point with this pace. So here we formed another group, which was pretty nice, but you can see that even though we are at the bottom of the race, I'm currently at the 20th place out of 31 riders, there are still attacks within the group. The race is very dynamic, and that is something I'm not used to from Z races based on the old categorization system. Usually the front was very dynamic, but if you got dropped, the group after that was usually very calm. Not this time.
My heart rate is all over the place. No.
But at this point it was pretty clear that we would ride in this setup until the base of the second lag snapper, and the only remaining question is how many of this group would remain after the climb. So here it is, and as you can see, the climb broke the group exactly as I expected. There was one guy who basically went way faster than the rest of the group, and several of the guys were dropped during the climb. I tried to maintain my own pace that I thought was sustainable. Unfortunately, very near the climb, I just couldn't go that hard anymore, and my previous two riding partners gone off, and I had to chase them on the following downhill, which was quite unnecessary, and I burned a lot of energy on that as well. I basically tried to chase them with everything I got, and I tried to chase them as smartly as possible. So I was utilizing the steering feature of my ZWIFT Play, really cutting around the corners as efficiently as possible until I was finally able to catch them.
I'm so tempted to throw in the towel now. I feel absolutely horrible.
So this is a feeling that probably most of you know very, very well. It's that feeling when you are really hurting and you are not even competing for the podium in the race. So you are basically just hurting for no good reason, and you know that if you quit, no one would know. But the problem is you would know. And I knew that if I continued here in this race, I would hurt for probably 10, 15 more minutes. But if I quit, I would hate myself for the rest of the day. And that feeling isn't worth it. I have big experience with this feeling. And that's what really drives me forward when the race got really, really hard. But today, I was very on the verge of giving up.
Oh, there are double XP for this. Nice.
So the third lap started and I was still riding with the same two guys, and thankfully neither of them showed any signs of any shenanigans or trying to really make things difficult for the other two, which is something I'm really grateful for, because I would be tempted to chase again, but I really didn't have the legs to do so. So basically I would just burn more matches before the third leg snapper, and then I would bonk anyway.
Hi.
This guy from Sweden that just joined us looked like he can't go anymore a few seconds ago, but wait until you see what he shows on the third leg snapper.
This is a big test of my mental toughness. Emma, I'm on the verge of losing today. I cannot even help myself with nose breathing because my nose is completely blocked. All right, ciao.
So this is the third leg snapper, and the guy from Sweden went into it with 12 watts per kilo. That wasn't something I was going to match. I tried to maintain a pretty hard pace. I think from the 3 leg snappers this was actually my best effort, and thankfully I managed to climb it still with the other 2 guys. Here you can see there is the first pre-finished test. The guy from Netherlands clearly increased the pace with the intention to shake us off. Somehow I managed to find the energy to match his speed, so for the time being we continued to ride together. But it was a nice and pretty courageous test since it was still 1300 meters to go.
Today I'm not strong enough to attack.
So at this point it was pretty clear that this race would go down to a sprint, which was something that I liked because that's something I can do very well. So I was basically just drafting behind the guys and waited for the attack in the sprinting position. I think in the circumstances in this race I did basically the best that I could. I have my conscience clear that I didn't quit and that I did all I could. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, subscribe, and I'll see you in hopefully one of the better races. Ciao.
I gave this my all.